Hey Beebum, can you jump up here for me? Good boy. Check that out. How cool is that? Lego Technics Land Rover Defender with working winch, suspension, gearbox, all sorts. It's the new shape Defender. But yeah, I would say it's probably built better than our actual Defender. Very, very impressive. Took me absolutely ages to build. But anyway, like the title suggests, I have just taken my C1 license. Now, for those of you that don't know what C1 entitlement actually allows you to do, that allows you to drive a vehicle over 3.5 tons, but up to 7.5 tons. So it's another little stepping stone. It doesn't mean you can go out and drive an articulated lorry. That's a separate test altogether. But yeah, it means that you are entitled to drive up to 7.5 ton vehicles. A little caveat to that, it doesn't include minibuses. That's a separate thing. Yeah, there's loads of different ones. But basically a motorhome, if you want a bigger motorhome up to 7.5 tons, it's a C1 license that you need. Most of you, I'm sure, will be fully aware that if you passed your driving test after the 1st of January 1997, you were far more restricted on your driving licence to what you could drive compared to someone that passed their licence before the 1st of January 1997. This is why you see so many different types of vehicles, different weights of vehicles available. Certainly when you look at motorhomes and camper vans, there seems to be that cut-off. Most manufacturers are trying to get the weight of their vehicles below 3.5 tons. What have you got there? Here's Bentley, by the way. He's stolen a slipper. It's not mine, honest. There you go, you can have it back. Yeah, most manufacturers try and get the weight of their vehicle under 3.5 tons because 3.5 tons is that magic cut-off. What I found was that it was a bit of a minefield when it came to working out what you had to do, what hurdles you had to jump through to get a C1 license. So in this video, I'm going to explain exactly how I did it, because if you're not careful, you can end up spending an absolute fortune. It's already an expensive thing to do anyway, but yeah, some companies are charging an absolute fortune because they will guide you through it all. You don't need that. Just follow these steps and you'll be fine. Just before I take you through all the different steps that you have to go through, all the companies that I have used will be linked in the description below. None of them have sponsored me for doing this video. It's entirely up to you if you use them. Obviously, the actual driving practical side of things will only be relevant if you live near us on the south coast. If not, then it's pretty pointless traveling all that way. But yeah, anyway, let's get into it. So the first thing you need to do is you need to book a medical. It's really straightforward to do this. Like I say, there are companies online that specialise in driver medicals. You can, if you feel more comfortable doing so, you can go to your local GP. Most of them will allow it. However, the wait time is usually quite a long time because obviously they've got to fit you in. They are generally a lot more expensive because their time is probably more valuable, really. Now, what I did was I went onto a company that specialises all throughout the country in driver medicals, and I think I booked it on something like a Thursday for Sunday afternoon. It was that quick. It cost me £35. You're in and out really quickly, and also don't be startled about doing a medical. It really is straightforward. A quick sort of measurement of height, weight. I took my prescription because I wear glasses, obviously. They are just checking the absolute basics. They take a blood pressure, they do a quick eyesight test themselves as well. They are just asking you loads of questions about your medical history, and if you don't have any issues, then it should be very, very straightforward. It probably took about 15 minutes. So the driver's medical, in fact I've got a form here, is a D form medical. So the doctor will fill that out, you have to fill some of it out. That, along with a D2 application form, you see how it says D4 at the top there, you need to get a D2 application form. They're available from the post office, local post office, or you can also get them sent to you from the DVLA for free. They will send you both those forms, the D4 and D2. You fill out the D2, And basically what that is for is you applying for your provisional license. You will only get a provisional license with a valid medical form alongside it. Now, if you are applying for a C1 license like myself, it's a really good idea to also tick, because there's loads of different categories. It's also advisable to tick the C box, also the D1 box, the D box. There's loads of different categories in there, and get a provisional for every single item. The reason for that is if in 10 years time you decide you want an even bigger motorhome, a 20-ton motorhome, if you hadn't already ticked those boxes and you don't have the provisional license for it, you'd have to you'd have to do another medical in the future. So it's certainly worth doing that. Just tick a few more boxes and you'll get those provisional licenses as well. You still have to take a separate test for all those things. If you want to drive a minibus, you'd have to do a minibus test and everything like that. So you won't actually be able to drive the vehicle. It just means that if you wanted to in the future, you wouldn't have to do another medical. So little tip there. And then once you've filled everything out on your D2 and your D4 form, you send them both away to the DVLA, and within, well, mine took probably about a week, you'll get your driving license back again with the new provisional entitlement. Now, one thing that I noticed, which I was kind of expecting, on the back of your driving license, you can see all the different categories that you can drive. And for some reason, I panicked a bit when it came back because it looked no different. I thought it was exactly the same. But what you can do is you can go onto the DVLA website and check your driving license endorsements, what you can and can't drive. And it will show you in there that you now have a provisional license for C1. So you've got your provisional license back. That's come back in the post. The next step, unfortunately, you have to do yet another theory and hazard perception. Now, with the theory test, I was quite surprised at how much detail it went into, despite the fact that I was just doing this to be able to drive a heavier camper van or motorhome. You get tested on loads of different things. You're basically doing the same theory test as if you were doing a articulated lorry. So you'll get questions on European driving rules, in the fact of how long you're allowed to drive for before you have to have a break if you're driving an articulated lorry. You get questioned on tachographs. You get questioned on the maximum width of vehicles that are allowed before they have to have an escort and all that kind of thing. It sounds really daunting at first, and I must admit I did a few practice questions and thought, what on earth, how am I going to answer all these? Now, the good thing is when you go onto the DVLA website and book your theory test, they give you the option of paying for however long, a month, 3 months, 6 months usage of their training package, which is all online. There's also an app, and it's really useful. There's loads and loads of questions, which, because it's the DVLA that set the questions, the ones that are in the revision pack are very, very, very similar to the ones that you'll actually get asked. There's a huge question bank, and you'll start repeating those questions, and you'll start learning the answers to the actual questions that you will get. It does eventually become fairly straightforward, and it's surprising how much you learn. So that's the next step. You've got to be able to do your theory test, and so that's your part 1A. And then you also have part 1B, which is another hazard perception. For those of you who don't know what a hazard perception is, I'm sure most of you do because I think you'll have done it. But what you do is it's a video from a car as you drive along, and any hazard that you think is going to force the driver of the car to potentially stop or change direction or slow down is classed as a hazard, and you have to click the mouse when you see a hazard approaching. If you click too early on the mouse, it can register as 0 on your score on that particular hazard. So yeah, that was the thing that I was probably most worried about, but I managed to do it. I got 74%, if you were wondering. So that's all done at your local DVLA test centre. Now they cost around about, it's something like £26 for the theory test and maybe about £17 or something for the hazard perception. So it costs about £40 to do both of them. Now, once you've done your theory test, you don't have to wait for that for your paperwork to come back, you will get given a letter there and then, and that's enough to show that you have passed your theory test. Take your bits of paper along with you to whoever you choose to do your driving lessons, and yeah, that's the next step. You now need to start actually driving a bigger vehicle and learn the different methods that you use to drive when you're driving a bigger vehicle. Now, the reason you can end up spending so much money doing this is a little bit down to Google, really. If you type in C1 LGV or HGV driving test or driving lessons onto Google, there are a few companies that have obviously paid to advertise at the top. Now, I got quotes from 3 different places. One of them was a company that was more of a broker. What you would do is you would send your details, they'd have a look at what part of the country you're in, they would give you a price and then pass you on to another company for them to actually do the lessons. And obviously they pocket some money, the other people pocket some money, and it can end up costing an absolute fortune. I was quoted £1,400, £1,399 it was, to do all this. They were going to book my medical for me, they were going to book my theory for me and all this kind of stuff, and it's just not necessary. It ends up, they take their little cut for every single bit, and just be so careful, because it's just, yeah, you just don't need to do that. The way I did it, where you actually book it all yourself, saves you money, and I reckon it probably cost me about £500. So it's an enormous saving, £900 saving. What I did was I went to a local company who outwardly says, do all this, do your medical, do your theory and everything, and then come to him. He doesn't get involved in the booking of all this, and as a result of that, it's far, far cheaper. What I did was I went to this guy who's local to us. Again, the link will be in the description below if you are interested, but like I say, it'll only be relevant if you live in this part of the country on the south coast. I went to him and he offers a free hours assessment. So once you've done your medical, your theory, you jump in the van with him, drive around, and he does it's not like a test, but he just notes down your driving habits, your driving style, and he knows from his expertise how long it's going to take you, roughly how long it's going to take you to learn the methods to pass a test for a C1 license. Now, this particular company, they had an offer on 12 hours of driving plus your test for £600. Now, that's what drew me to him. I thought, well, that sounds pretty good. And the good thing about him was I did my assessment and he actually said, I think you only need 10 hours. So already it was going to cost me less. So like I say, far cheaper than the £1,400 that another company had quoted me. And the way the day is run, compared to when you learned to drive your car, where you probably did a lesson a week, an hour a week, something like that, this is done a lot faster. So I did 6 hours driving in one day and then 4 hours driving the following day. It's all over and done with very quickly, because they don't need to teach you how to read the speed limits, how to change lanes and all this kind of stuff. It's just specific to driving a bigger vehicle. Now, the vehicle that you drive for these practical lessons, in my instance, was an Iveco or Iveco Daily. It's not much bigger than a normal van that's under 3.5 tons, but this particular one was rated to 5.7 tons, which is why you need that C1 license. You see them quite often, the type of vans that have sort of double wheels on each rear, on each side of the rear axle. They're usually vans that have been rated higher to carry more weight, and that's when you need a C1 license. Now, the interesting thing about the practical driving for a C1 license is I thought it would be like they would be teaching you to drive like it's a bigger car, but it's more the other way, really. It's more like you're learning to drive a small articulated lorry. You are taught to use all the roads, you know, move right out. If you're overtaking parked cars, you basically block the whole road and give yourself plenty of space. You're slowing down way before hazards. Any narrowing in the road, you're giving loads and loads of space. You're slowing right down to make sure that there's no lorry coming towards you. It's just a very, very different way of driving. Compared to your car license, there's a lot more of really paying attention to every single road sign, making sure that you don't go in width restrictions and that kind of thing. So it's quite different, but it's fairly straightforward. Like I say, 6 hours one day, 4 hours the following day, and then the test straight after that. So you go straight into your test, 2 days and it's done, which is quite nice. It's a quick process and you learn a lot in those 2 days. You're pretty tired after those 2 days, that's for sure. But yeah, and then once that's done, you, like I say, you have your test. I've got a copy. Yeah, so the test here, very, very similar to a your normal driving license that you did when you drove a car. You have minors and majors, but instead of majors, they're called serious faults. You're allowed up to 16 minor faults. So that's things like not checking your mirror in the correct time, or signalling too early or too late, and that kind of thing. So anything that's an offence is a serious fault. So I don't know, driving through a width restriction when your vehicle is too wide for that width restriction, that's an offence. So that would be classed as a serious fault. Speeding, that's a serious fault. Just one of those and you will fail. And also if you get lots and lots of minors in the same thing, that will eventually count as a serious and you will fail. But yeah, you're allowed up to 16 minor faults. Don't try and beat me because I got no faults at all. Yeah. Oh, I nearly forgot. You also have to do a reversing exercise. Now, it's an exercise that you would never ever have to do again in your life. As part of the test criteria, they have to see a reversing to the left, reversing to the right, a reversing in a bay. They've made a system where you do all of that in one manoeuvre. So you drive forward between two sort of yellow lines, past a post. You've got a couple of cones that you have to stop in between, and then you have to reverse around that post that you've just driven past into a bay. Now it sounds very straightforward, but there's a few catches that when you first try it, it means that you end up in completely the wrong place, and you have to stop at exactly the right place, that you're not too far back, but you also have to make sure that you're in the bay. So you're allowed to get out once and check how far back you are. You're also allowed a shunt, so if you have got into the wrong place, you can move forward again and then continue your reversing. You'll have to do that once or twice, I think. It takes about 10-15 minutes, fairly straightforward, and provided that you've done that, you then continue. You either do that at the start of your test or you do it at the end, and then you've got either 50 minutes or an hour, between 50 minutes and an hour's actual drive around the local area. And provided you don't get too many minors or any serious faults, you come back and you should, provided you've been successful, end up with your passed your driving test certificate. That shows that you've passed, and you get that there and then, and your driving instructor will then send that off to the DVLA, and you should get your license back with your new correct endorsement on. So just check that that's on there. A bit of a long process. This has been a really wordy video, I understand that. Yeah, unfortunately that's licensing for you. So if any of you out there are thinking of doing your C1 license, this should hopefully give you a step-by-step guide so that you don't either make a mistake and end up doing the wrong license, or end up paying an absolute fortune. That's ridiculous. I think, like I say, my actual driving lessons were £450 plus the test. That's 10 hours plus test, £450. Plus £35 for my medical, and let's say £50 for the theory and hazard perception. I don't even think it was that much. But all in all, you're less than £550, which is completely different to what that company quoted me. Hopefully that's been useful for you. The only other thing that's left really is to give you some time to speculate on why I've done the C1 license. I'd be interested to see why you think we've done it, but all will be revealed in a couple of months' time. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we shall see you in the next video. Thank you very much. Cheers.